Commissioners, we're going to start. Welcome to the January 18th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. I will call the hearing to order at 1 o'clock. Mrs. Johnson, can we have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call. Chair Bauke.
Here.
Vice Chair Wardlow.
Here.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Here.
Commissioner Boss.
Present.
Commissioner DeLucia.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next on our agenda is preliminary matters. First off, with requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or additions to ex-agenda items. Ms. Arciniega, do we have any continuances, withdrawals, or postponements, or additional items?
No, we have none.
Okay. Next on our agenda is announcements and appeals. Ms. Arciniega, do we have any announcements or appeals?
Yes. So one announcement, and first starting with an apology, was I failed to pass on a media release that the city put out last week on Monday. So for the La Cumbra Macy's redevelopment, earlier in the spring, the developers had submitted a pre-application for redevelopment of the site. And the city initially, that exceeded the city's height limit, including the city's charter height limit. Initially, the city was of the understanding that our city charter height limit prevailed over state bonus density law and exceptions and waivers, concessions and waivers. And so that was the feedback we provided to the applicant team at that time. Since that time, the city has sought outside counsel and found that indeed the state law would trump the city charter's height limit. So in the second review this winter, the city went ahead and provided that information along with our additional review of their second preliminary application, and letting them know that they indeed could proceed as exceeding the height limit, so at 76 feet using a state bonus density waiver. So that was important news. It doesn't mean that necessarily the sky is the limit just because you're doing bonus density. It doesn't mean you get to apply that, but environmental review still applies. So if visual impacts were to occur for this site or any other, that would have to be considered as part of environmental review. And we still have design review and policy review as well. So there are still limitations, but it certainly is a change in our interpretation of our own city process. So I wanted to pass that along to you. Apologies for the delay. It was a bustling week last week, and that slipped my mind. But thank you for the opportunity to share that, debrief on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
is this open for just a brief question or not?
A brief clarifying question. It's not on the agenda. It's just an announcement.
Well, okay. I was curious about the height limitation allowance. Am I correctly understanding that that only prevails because we didn't get our housing reports into the state, and during the time in which we were late, there was a window that allowed developers to take advantage of that builder's loophole?
Chair Bauke, Commissioner Barnwell, that's not correct.
Okay, good.
I'd be happy to talk with you after.
Okay,
the
good.
meeting.
Let's do that. Thank you very
Thank
much.
Good. Thank you. Moving on to the agenda, the next is a review, consideration, action of the following draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions. Ms. Arciniega, we now have item C, which is those items. First, we have the draft Planning Commission minutes for December 21st, 2023. And we have two other items. Are there any public speakers on the comments or the minutes or the resolution that we know of?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. We have none.
Okay. So I will take up the December 21st, 2023 Planning Commission minutes. I'd like to open that up to my fellow commissioners if they have any corrections or comments on the minutes. Leslie, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had coordinated with, this involves the minutes, but it also involves the conditions of approval for 1509 Shoreline Drive. So if you allow me to proceed, I'm going to.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you. So I did send an email to Ms. Johnson, Chair Bauke, Ms. Ostranger, and Ms. Arciniega regarding the minutes. And just to go over the motion, which is on page 4 of 6 of the minutes, let's see, so the revisions, number one got added, number 2 got taken care of, number 3 got taken care of, which we appreciate. Number 4, the use of the Glorietta is restricted to installation and maintenance and is not for recreation purposes. That one, upon quite a bit of review, did not make it into the conditions of approval. So I think, Ms. Johnson, you had indicated that you corrected that, or?
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Yes, we'll make those corrections.
Okay, so that will be included?
Yes, that will be included.
Okay, and then on number 5, I told you that one was clear as mud. And Commissioner Boss said the same thing. What is number 5? Did you figure that out or not?
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. I was not able to figure it out
Okay.
either, so
Okay, let's
should
just-
we eliminate that point? Or do-
Yeah, if that's okay, let's just take it out of there. If no one can recollect exactly what I meant by that in the motion. And then, let's see, number 6 is, that one got included, so we appreciate that. And that takes care of that. And then also on the conditions of approval, since we're discussing those, I also made a note that on page 7 and 8 of the conditions of approval, numbers 4 and 5 respectively, references made to subsections B and C above, but I wasn't sure what that meant since I couldn't find a C above. So I wonder, Ms. Johnson, did I miss something there?
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. I also could not find it, but I need to speak with Allison DeBusk because I think that she changed the numbering. It used to be letters, and it's now changed to like a new numbers. So I think that might be the confusion. I
Yeah,
just
because
need
there was
to-
no D either
Yeah.
anymore. Okay. So when we will, could we just include in our motion that that will be taken care of so that there's clarity then?
Yeah,
And
of
that there's parity between the actual minutes and the actual conditions of
Yeah,
approval?
I'll make
Okay.
sure that they both
Okay.
reflect each other equally.
Thank you very much. That's all I
course.
have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any other comments on the minutes? Okay, so with that, could I have a motion to proceed with the corrections and as noted?
Yeah, I'll move the minutes with and the conditions of approval for, Mr. Chair, can I just move both of the conditions of approval also for the Highway 101 project?
Please do.
Okay, so the minutes of December 21st, 2023, and the conditions of the Planning Commission resolutions 15-23 and 6016-23, with the revisions made to 016-23. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll second that.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Abstain, I was absent.
Commissioner Barnwell?
Abstain.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Vice Chair Wardlow?
Yes.
Chair Bauke?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so that completes item 1 and 2. Number 3 is the Planning Commission draft resolution 016-23 at 1509 Shoreline Drive. We did all 3. Oh, okay, I thought we just did the first 2. Okay, so sorry for that. My correction. So, moving on. Next is our public comments pertaining to items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any comments from the members of the public pertaining to items that aren't on our agenda? Ms.
Thank you, Chair Balke. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and I don't see anyone in the audience, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised, but we did receive one letter from Stephen A. Johnson that was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Balke.
Okay, and so now we can close public comments. So moving on to the next agenda is Section 3, which is the discussion item. At this point, we have a training item on the city's application review process. I will let Ms. Arganega go through the staff presentation and then open it up to questions by my fellow commissioners when she's completed. So proceed.
Thank you, Chair Balke. And Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Megan Arciniega. I am the Senior Planner in the Planning Development Review section. And I wanted to provide your commission and the public with an overview of the city's planning application process for a number of reasons. Some of the goals of what we want to go through today, one is to have you gain familiarity with the city's planning application review process. Whether you've done work in other jurisdictions or followed the city for some time or you've done permits yourself, our processes have evolved over time. And so especially post-COVID and moving into a digital process, there's a lot of updates that we've done in recent years. Also, I want you to have the ability to help guide those that you speak with or those that are interested in how to find information, since you are ambassadors to the Planning Division, so that you feel comfortable in navigating some of these tools, and then also as you research for yourselves. And then also I want to take this opportunity, since we are in a public forum, to inform the public on how the city's public hearing process works, and also clarify the Planning Commission's role as a discretionary review body. And then we'll end with some tools that hopefully you can take home and take with you, whether for your own research or to help others through the process. So the things we'll touch on today are, first we'll touch on the planning services that the Planning Division offers for applicants these days. We've evolved to kind of offer a lot more services than we used to. We'll also touch on the application review process itself. In years past, it was referred to as the Development Application Review Team, or DART. So if you hear that term, if you've heard it before, it refers to the process that applications go through before they come to your commission. And then number 3 is the public hearing process. So again, how the public is invited into our system. And then the Planning Commission's role in being a discretionary review body and helping you feel comfortable inserting yourself as a discretionary review body and where you can affect projects. And then I'll leave you with some tools to take home. So first I want to walk through some of the tools, and at the end I'll pull up the live web pages, but I'm giving you snapshots as you go so you start to become familiar with their city's process. So there's a lot of tools that we put on our website that allow you or others to ask counter questions. So counter questions are intended to be generic or general questions about a property or how zoning works, or how what you might expect, or what kind of applications or forms. Once you get into more project specifics, we have other tools to help people understand what might be needed for their specific project, but there are certainly a number of services. We have the planning counter, building counter, public works counter, transportation even answers questions, and so does fire department can be contacted. So there's a lot of resources out there to get questions answered. We have information on fees, what forms and applications you need. You can look up a permit, whether your own or someone else's. So if your neighbor is doing construction or you heard of a project, there are ways for you to go in yourself and look up permits online from your home. There's guidance, project guidance documents. So as the state comes out with new programs and policies, there's new types of projects that we're seeing. So we're trying to develop project guidance, whether it's SB 330 or accessory dwelling units, all the latest and greatest. We're trying to capture that information so that we have a consistent messaging of how that really applies on the ground and help people develop their projects accordingly. We have reference libraries so that people can access our municipal code, general plan, et cetera. We have information about development activity in town. So there are maps, live maps of where all the ADUs that have been approved are. There's live maps of all the accessory AUD projects, so the multi-unit housing projects, where all of those have landed in the city over the past 10 years. We have active and current construction monitoring reports. So if you're interested in just tracking all building permits that come out, and certain people, a lot of people do, there's a report you can run to just see what building permits have been issued in lifetime during a certain period of time. And you can track that on your own. I mean, those resources are available to everyone. We have a lot of information about historic resources. We take our historic resources very seriously, and they're near and dear to our city. We have a lot of program information. There's Mills Act tax incentive programs to help protection of historic resources and finance those improvements. We have a city architectural historian that regularly meets and chats with people on the phone or via email to help them out, and her contact information is also on our website. We have a bunch of resource reference maps of whether it's an overlay or a zoning or whatever. Those maps are generally available online, and we have them in line on GIS forms. So you can zoom into a specific address that you're looking at by parcel. If you're just trying to understand a zone overall, if you're trying to find a property because you're looking to open up a business and you're looking for all the commercial zone properties, or to know if it's industrial or if housing is allowed, all of that live data is available in a GIS interactive map for the public to use. And then we also have records and archives available online in a limited way. I'll get into that a little bit more. Essentially, permit records are readily available online. Architectural drawings are copyrighted by those designers, architects, and engineers. So those aren't available online, and they do require an appointment to come in and view. But you can set up that appointment online, and anyone is welcome to do so. So a lot of tools to just get people going in terms of looking into what even they can do with their property or what their neighbors are doing with their property. In addition, we have a lot of counter services, and I touched on this a little bit, but you will hear from the public that we have changed our in-person counter hours, and that is absolutely true. There's reason behind it. We now actually offer a different variety of services, whereas previously you could only walk in or call on the phone and get a voicemail back. And that wasn't reaching all of our constituents. So there's plenty of people that cannot take an hour of their day to drive down, park, and go ask a question about their neighbor's unit or whatever's going on next door. That's a lot of time. Some people can, and that's easier for them. They'd rather not navigate a whole website. But there's different people out there. And with that variety, having the online appointments has been really critical to reach a different population of our city. So we now offer virtual appointments, so a live chat with a planner specific to the problem or the issue that you're looking to understand. So we have different appointment times are based on that specific subject areas. So we have planners specific to design review that can help you understand the design review process, general planning questions, specific land use questions. How is this land use gonna, be approved, or is there a zone I should be looking for? Also zoning plan check questions. So you might get a permit in and you're like, I'm not understanding what it is they want me to do with these corrections. Like, can somebody help me, walk me through that? There is an appointment time for you. And there's, last but not least, and probably most popular, is the accessory dwelling units appointment times, because there's great interest in our community of developing accessory dwelling units. Everyone kind of just hears that's something they should do or consider, or maybe you could do it too, and they don't even know where to start. It's not people that are out there building multi-unit housing. It's just someone told me I should have a unit here. Where do I start? And so those appointment times are actually really critical, because it's not people coming back time and time again. They're looking for kind of a greater understanding and talking with a live person. The other benefit I will add to our virtual appointments is that you are sharing a screen. So you can share your screen and say, this is my drawing, or this is my property, or this is what my grandpa gave me, this is the plot plan, and I get to see what it is you're looking at. And I go, oh, yes, that is a building permit from 1962. No, that actually gives you that garage. That means something. Or I can show you, this is the floodplain over your parcel. So this isn't just an off comment, this is the concern here. So that ability to share screens has actually been really super helpful. So I would encourage you to support planning staff when they're trying to use people to use the virtual systems. It is a service that has been really, really great, and we do it in addition to walk-in. We just have reduced our walk-in hours to be able to provide those appointments in the afternoon. They are scheduled out. The other thing is we have email. So before, we didn't have an email inbox specific to the planning counter. It was just a phone call, which is nice in its own, and we still have the phone available. But be able to like attach a thing or send in writing and hear back and have a written discourse has also been really productive. So I just want to make you familiar with those services. The other thing that we have really honed in on is our pre-application services. So not required, but when you have a question that goes beyond just a counter question of, I'm just kind of trying to understand my house, can I build a unit or not? You're just trying, and you have something specific, or you've uncovered something that you need to unravel a little more, but you're not ready to submit an application. You just want an affirmative answer from planning. What does this mean for my property? Or what can I do? What can't I do specific to this site? When you need that definitive feedback, there's a number of services we have. And sometimes that definitive feedback is from design review, right? So there's some projects that are more of a design lift. It's, you know, a house is allowed, but will design review support this type of house or this type of building? And really the critical hurdle for that project is a design-related hurdle, and an architect or an owner wants to know, before I put in fees, I want to go talk to SFDB. I want to see what ABR is going to say. Well, there's a service for that. So you can go for a one-time only concept review. It's a smaller fee. Your plans do not need to be nearly as developed. And the idea is you're getting that initial conceptual feedback. Their comments are non-binding. So the board that's reviewing at that time, giving you they're just giving you comments. It's informal. When you come in for your application, that is your formal review. But it allows that back and forth and kind of feedback loop before getting into the full permit system. Same goes for, so a planner consultation is kind of an open-ended question. We have 2 levels. You can just do a phone call only, so at a lower fee. If you want a planner to research a certain item, you identify what that is in your planner consultation application, they'll research it for you, get back to you, and you can have a virtual meeting or a phone call. Or if you need something written in writing, which a lot of people do when they're in escrow or looking at a property, they really want some definitive information from the planning department to make a call on whether or not something's a good investment. Planner consultations are super helpful. Or whether you even want to begin the planning application process. Is there even a path here? That's another time it's used. We have preliminary zoning plan checks. A lot of times that's for accessory dwelling unit applications. So that's basically doing the plan check that you would get if you were putting in a building permit that zoning would review. So usually it's for projects that are only a building permit, a fence, accessory dwelling unit, garage, something straightforward that you're not going through design review, but you need to know that you have understood your open yard correctly, because there are 21 different ways to calculate open yard. So when you are in that situation, you can get a zoning plan check, preliminary zoning plan check. We also have what you guys are maybe most familiar with are the pre-application review team, PRT. This is the most formal by far, right? So this is where it really is a larger project that has implications perhaps with multiple permits and divisions. And so it's a very formal feedback where we route your preliminary application to building, to fire, to engineering, public works, transportation, and get feedback on the red flags this development's gonna have, and then any like initial comments if you're going to need to address this or include this or consider this. And so the idea is that it better informs your formal application. Lastly, we also have staff determinations like creek setback determinations if you're near a creek and you just need that information to even move forward, or zoning letters that help you understand what zoning allows you on a certain site, specific to a certain site. So lots of services really tailored to what it is that you need. So the pre-application, it would be the first step in the process if you choose to do that. It's not always required. It is required in some instances. So if you have a large a development plan greater than 3,000 feet, or a conditional use permit, or a tentative subdivision map that has, 10 units on it. Those larger projects are going to require you to do that pre-application review team, that PRT, because it's a larger project. But otherwise, they're not required, just totally a service that we offer. Your formal application is the planning application, PLN application. That's where whether it's design review or a modification to a setback or conditional use permit, that's the same form, all types of entitlements, it's just one application. And then finally, your building permit application. Once you get your planning entitlements, you would submit for building. The city, after the pandemic, went totally virtual. So all digital, all boards and commissions, all plans in the city's process are all digital. We don't have paper plans anymore. We've saved a lot of trees. We're pretty proud of that, but mostly it's exciting that we are moving into the digital age. There's a lot of software tools out there that we're going to be implementing in this upcoming year that really are cool modern ways to plan check, more specific, to be able to really streamline comments and review. So now that we're in the digital realm, we can start to take advantage of those kind of tools. So that's exciting. Essentially, the way it works is you still have forms or applications, right? Those PDFs that you saw, the PLN, you fill those out. You have a digital PDF of your plans. You have a PDF of your signed agreements. You upload, you have a profile on our system, and then you create a new case and you upload those files, and that's your submittal. And then the counter gets notified, we have a new submittal, and then we'll check it to see if this is what you're applying for, give you the fees, and then once those fees are paid and we've determined we have everything, it gets routed to a planner. The other benefit of this is that this allows information, like I said, to everyone in terms of permits. So you can look up not just you can check your own permit status, you can look up someone else's permit, and it's also the way that you upload corrections or documents when you're in any system, not just planning. So planning, building, fire, public works. So I'm going to pause intermittently just to see if there's any things that would help you guys understand. Do you have any questions about the city's planning services, or are there any tools that you think would be helpful?
Commissioners, anybody have any questions on this subject area? I see none, so proceed. Oh, sorry, Miss Sheila, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, are there fees for these different varieties of consultations? And so people are informed of those to start with on there.
Yes, so the initial planning counter appointments are all free, right? Or planning or any counter appointments, email, phone call, walk-in, or virtual appointment are free. It's just kind of the equivalent of walking in, but just different forums. At a certain point, if a question requires research, we'll direct you to doing one of the pre-application services, because then a planner can then be dedicated to research it. And that does require a fee because it's recouping that planner's time. And then it can be, depending on which of those services it's a different fee.
Okay, and a few years ago, the city bought a new software system for the planning department, and there were some difficulties with it. Has all of that been resolved so that it
Yeah.
works smoothly? No?
There's no issues ever, just kidding. There's always going to be issues. That's just the nature of technology. I mean, we see it with microphones, we see it with TVs, right? So I don't think there'll ever be a time there's never a glitch, but yes, we've adapted it to ourselves much more. So we bought the Acela system, not out of the box. We made it designed to our city ourselves, which takes some effort in working out the kinks of how are we going to apply this software technology. And there's two parts to it. There's the internal side to the Acela software, what city staff sees, and then there's the external facing side of that and what the public sees. And quite frankly, the external side is very clunky, or was very clunky. It recently received an update and is softer now on the applicant side. The coming changes in the next year will soften that even more and actually will make it much more modern in terms of how you receive your plan check corrections, how you upload things, making sure things are vetted before, in advance. There's a lot of updates coming soon that will be much more modern. So it took a while for us to adapt that system first, and now we're in the kind of running with it, and now we're preparing to actually improve those systems. But yeah, there will always be a glitch, and that's why I stress also reach out to the planning counter or to whatever counter person. That's why I want that to be hit hard. Call, email, I'm having an issue. It's totally fair that there might be a technical issue.
Okay, and when you say soften, I assume you mean make it more user-friendly?
User-friendly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was just really, clunky before. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yes. Some of us heard quite a bit about its
Yes.
happiness. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Wiscombe next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to follow up on the dreaded Acela system since Commissioner Lodge and I have lived with this for so long. It used to be before we got the wonderful Acela system that you could just look up a permit and find out if your neighbor actually had a permit for the amount of work they're doing or whatever, or what they're doing, and so are you saying that, and then when we got Acela, you couldn't do that anymore? I was totally frustrated and finally gave up. If I need information, I usually contact someone because I couldn't operate that. So are we at the point now where I could actually go online and put in an address and find out if there's a permit?
You should be able to, yeah.
Okay, so I might give it a go again.
Yes, I would encourage you to. And then also continue to provide the feedback, right? Because staff work on it as the extent we can, but it's really important to have voices from the outside saying, this is the frustrating point. We have, frequent flyers who are happy to give us that feedback, but it's valuable and it is taken to heart. And sometimes the answer is, no, we agree, we're waiting to fix that or update that. But it's still good to know what tripping points are because internally we're using it differently, right? We're
Right.
not.
Yeah.
So it's always beneficial. So I would say be that voice for the community and provide that feedback.
Is there any particular person, Ms. Arciniega, that we should contact if we have an issue or want to give feedback on the Acela system, and if we're trying to look up information on it? Is there one particular person that?
Not one particular person, but you would just let the planning counter know, and then we take that information and either send it to our IT counterparts or whoever is working on that portion of the system. So there's different people doing different things. So it depends on what the issue is.
Is there an email? I'm just not trying to beat a dead horse, but is there an email at the planning counter? Can you give us an email address where we could actually provide feedback if we're looking for information under that system?
Yeah, it's planningcounter@santabarbaraca.gov.
So that's it, it's just planning counter, and that will, okay.
We'll click on it into the website live at the end, just so that, like I said, this is to help you guys, but also the public, really how we're navigating. And websites change. This will be stale information, at some point. But the idea is, at least let's explore these tools. Let's refine them. It's an opportunity to always, improve. But the planning counter email ticks a lot of boxes in terms of issues, not just zoning questions, but if you're having an issue getting into your account or uploading, that's your first point of contact.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any, so let's move on to the next
Moving
section.
on. So once you get into the system and you've figured out all the bugs and you have your account working, presumably it's easier. And your project's going to get assigned to a planner depending on what type of entitlement you're seeking, right? All projects are different. There's different kind of sections. So there are ministerial approvals typically. So someone that's working on just, coastal exemptions or zoning clearances, kind of temporary uses, just quick check the box, making sure ABC license clearances, those kinds of things. Design review approvals we're all familiar with, but they can come in many forms. It could be an administrative approval, so that means staff level looking at something and saying this meets the guidelines, I can approve it right now. Or consent review, which is a representative of that board, or a representative or two, that review it on consent hearings or a full board review. Our land use approvals can either go to the staff hearing officer, your planning commission, or as city council. And so we have staff, right, assigned in different ways. And a single application can hit 1, 2, 3 of these areas and all in different combinations. I can have a land use application that also, for a modification, but also needs a coastal exemption. I can have, a design review project that also needs, a clearance of some kind, a tree removal clearance. There's all kinds of combinations there. And so it can get routed, there'll be to multiple staff. Generally, someone will be assigned to the case, but there might be multiple planners working on that, that approval. So once it gets assigned, the case planner kind of ushers it through the process. All projects kind of generally hit these 4 areas. If a project doesn't hit one of these areas, it's not that it wasn't reviewed, it's that it was a non-issue. So you might say, my project's never had environmental review. They did. We did environmental review internally. It just didn't trigger any, it didn't trigger any AR. It was something that was clearly exempt from CEQA. Or people say, no one's told me this was a policy issue. It's because it was clearly within the vision of the city and the general plan, and it clearly meets those policies. So it wasn't something that was discussed with that applicant because it was clearly within that. But if you propose a project that's inconsistent with policy, that's going to be something we're pointing out in your application materials that, hey, this is inconsistent with our general plan, and there's policies that really guide us in a different direction. So the 4 categories, as you may be familiar with, completeness review is generally knowing do we have all the information we need for this application? Do we have plans? Do we understand what the scope is? And are the plans clear on what we need to do, what the approval is here? Like, if this is a setback modification, are we seeing where the setback line is and where that encroachment is so that that approval is very clear what is intended by that approval, right? So we're going to be critiquing plans and making sure that they're clear enough to understand what action is being taken, and also documenting, the rules and regulations at the time. Design review is consistency with our design guidelines. Environmental review is the California Environmental Quality Act compliance. And then policy, like I said, is general plan consistency. One other thing that happens, you get assigned a case planner, but you also get reviewed by the land development team. That's what I kind of mentioned on before. That's the association, if you will, of building, fire, engineering, transportation. Not everyone knows how much all the other divisions review. Even a design review project will get routed to transportation if there's a transportation element at play. So if you're changing a driveway and a parking area and doing ADA spots, transportation's reviewing that to make sure it meets maneuvering standards. Public Works is reviewing that to make sure your driveway meets city standards in terms of curb cut. Fire might be reviewing it to ensure that you have adequate width of driveway for their fire trucks. So even though you think this is just a design review project, that's actually doesn't mean that there aren't 10 different hands looking at it, making sure that you're not going to be bumping up against something later down the road. So we do, so that whole team is involved in completeness review. We're looking at the application materials. The completeness review also involves the zoning plan check and making sure we have everything needed for a decision. Design review is making, and policy review I already touched on. So to give you an idea of how many people are involved in the land development team, I'm going to go through them. There are a lot. So transportation planning involved a lot. You guys see them at Planning Commission a lot because unfortunately they have to get drugged through the whole process with us because there's a lot of transportation issues that come up. Building and safety gets involved. Creeks gets involved. For stormwater review, engineering of public works often gets involved for public improvements. Environmental services looks at waste streams. Fire will look for access requirements and fire code. Housing will look for affordability requirements, covenants, making sure that any affordable housing plans are fair and just and meet the city standards. Parks and Recreation will look at a project if the project either involves a park or is adjacent to a park. Transportation Operations, so if there's a project that impacts city parking lots or city parking systems, they'll be involved. Urban Forestry gets involved if there's tree removals. Wastewater looks at sewer systems. Water distribution, making sure we have enough water service to the site. Planning looks at the project. Our environmental analyst will look at any environmental impacts. Water Resources Conservation looks at to make sure that water usage meets city standards for drought-tolerant plantings and such. Our architectural historian looks at it for historic impacts, and water supply also looks at, water supply and distribution kind of go hand in hand, but making sure we have backflow devices and all city services. So there are a lot of people looking at all of these applications as they go through the process. And that's what I'm gonna hit on next is it's not just one and done. So this team first reviews the application materials, just as planning does. We do a site visit together. Then we meet internally and go over and make sure that whatever our division is going to be requiring of a project, it's not in conflict of someone else. Or if it is, that we try to talk it out or have an understanding of how that impacts the planning approval. A good example is if a sewer system upgrade is needed and you're in the coastal zone and you have to trench and do a sewer upgrade down the street, that now expands the scope of your coastal development permit. And that's not something that engineering is thinking of, but it is what planning is thinking of, and so it means we need to then tailor that project scope. So we look for internal inconsistencies and make sure we're on the same page. Then they get involved in our completeness letters. They write into the letters any information needed to ensure feasibility. So if we don't have the right services, is that noted and given to the applicant? They also give advisories, like red flags of, this isn't a completeness item, you can certainly proceed with planning, but know that you're going to need a new water meter for this site. Sometimes that big ticket item will, kill a project. A homeowner says, never mind, I don't want to do this. And that's just as important because you don't know what is in the wheelhouse of a certain applicant. So they also take the time to identify which of their permits are going to be needed. So we're all about planning permits, but do they need an encroachment permit? Do they need a sprinkler permit? Do they need a public improvement permit? They also provide fees in the same letter. Then they attend the meeting with planning staff and the applicant. So we had, in pre-COVID, rooms full of all of our LDT staff sitting down with an applicant, answering questions. What in the letter can I help you understand? Is there something in there that concerns you? Is there something that now you're upset about that you're not, you disagree with? And so we have these conversations with the applicant. We still can do them, we do them in person on request, but generally they're on Zoom. Most applicants have preferred the digital or virtual meetings because they can kind of hop into them from wherever they're at. But they're very helpful meetings in helping applicants get through to the next next phase. Doesn't end there. LDT staff provide their individual contact in these letters. They're then available to talk and meet and work through issues to applicants after those meetings. So a good example of this is creeks, right? You have to do these stormwater things, standard template, but they're like, okay, but then when it hits the road and they're actually trying to put in the plans, they have all kinds of questions. Is this what's going to hit tier 2? If I do this, does this count? There's all kinds of negotiations, and that's not happening in a 1-hour meeting. It's, their engineer talking with Creeks and saying, this is how we navigate this. So this is kind of the BMP that works most successfully. This is why we don't recommend this paver for this situation. That's the kind of involvement that our LDT staff are doing. It's really, really incredible. Then they draft conditions of approval. So when they come to your commission, our conditions a lot of times will incorporate anything on their end they'll need. Usually it's a public improvement element. They review the staff report. If it's a transportation-heavy item, transportation will be involved. Usually they're the only ones that get so lucky to write for us. Then they attend the hearing as needed. And then they review again before design review and PDA and final approvals. So it is through the entire process, the same LDT staff all the way through, and then they'll be reviewing the building permit as well. So I just want to paint the picture that there's a lot of hands involved and there's a lot of huge effort to help projects navigate all the code requirements and not just planning. So with that, I'll leave it there. Any questions about either the process or the development team?
Okay, Vice Chair Wardrow will start off on this section.
Thank you very much for this presentation. This is super helpful to me. I have a potentially silly question, but when you say that it's the same staff throughout the whole process, is it that for each project that all of these various teams that you're discussing, that they appoint one person that then stays with that project the whole time?
Absolutely, yep.
Awesome, okay. That's
The
good.
only, and we have to be realistic, the exception is if that staff leaves, right? They get a job elsewhere, they are replaced or
There's
promoted.
consistency and.
But the idea is that it's consistency, and it does make it easier, because you've seen it, I remember that issue, yeah, I talked to him, we resolved that, so, but they live, yeah, they're assigned that project.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Commissioner DeLucio.
So this is the pre-application process? Is that what you're going over right now?
It's
Or an application?
application as
Okay,
well.
so is there a way, 'cause it sounds like this can add up to a lot of fees. Because when we had 1509 Shoreline Drive, I saw one inspection fee of $36,000.
Wow.
So, I mean, can somebody, when do they know what the fees are going to be in case they don't want to pursue it to its end result?
Good question, yeah. So the fees for the planning, either pre-application or application, are incorporated into the planning's fees up front. Most of our fees, 90% are fixed fee. So it's all of this involvement is already calculated in. And I do want to underscore this because this changed in kind of recent years. Within the last 5 years, we used to do kind of a partial fee up front and then recover that fee at building permit time. We went away from that and we now just have a full, they're not full cost recovery yet. They're ramping up and they're also still subsidized in many categories. But essentially fixed fee covers all this review. But it's not a light lift. So that is part of what's included in our fees.
Are they paid up front, the fees?
Yes.
And then at the end it's reconciled, you may get something back, or that's,
No, so they're fixed fees, so we take the whole fee. Many times what the staff time usually will exceed the fee that we're getting. That's what I mean by subsidized.
gotcha.
It's, I'm not a part of the budget and the fee schedules, but there are some fees, like planner consultations, et cetera, that are artificially low to provide that additional access. The only exception to fixed fees, just to be clear, are more like environmental review. When you have an EIR, that's not something you can estimate upfront with a fixed fee. That's just going to be the nature of that beast. So we do a deposit and then like a billable by hour. But it's probably higher than 90% of our fees are fixed fee.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner DeLucio. Next, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As of about a year, there's a lot of staff involved in each one of these projects, and as of about a year ago, there were a lot of vacancies in the Community Development Department. What's the situation now?
Good question, because it certainly impacts how we work. I would say we're filling up. I don't know that I know everybody's department. I know Building and Safety has finally filled up more than years past. Doesn't mean they're not overdone. They have a lot. Planning as well, we have a few recruitments open, and transportation just filled up. I would say it's getting there.
Okay.
I wouldn't say there's not vacancies, right? But,
No. Well, I think there, with that many people, those many
Yeah.
departments involved, there are always going to be a vacancy here and
sure.
there.
And retirements.
Yeah.
Also, we saw an upswing, this is conjecture, but I'm pretty sure it'd be true, with the pandemic, right? And if you had the ability to retire and not have to deal with this new reality of how clunky life was and working life, I think a lot of people took that opportunity to say, I think I can retire now. That's okay. Versus really trudging through, because that was a rough time to figure out all of our systems. We went all digital, Acela, there was a lot of changes. We had new codes in place. So I think we saw retirements happen a lot that then had to be filled.
Okay.
I
Okay,
think that's a true statement.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Arciniega, can you go back to the slide that had all the different creeks, transportation? Yeah. Yeah, that's it, okay. So,
I have to go through them all, whatever.
that's all right. So, my question is, okay, and you have one planner that is taking the project from inception through to building permit, et cetera. Does that planner meet individually with all of these disciplines, or do you all get together as one big group?
Good question. Yeah, so we do get together as one group. Let me also clarify. So who of this group gets involved in a project is contingent on the project, right? So
Right,
if,
but let's just assume it's a,
let's say,
let's assume
10 of
it's
them
a
are involved.
lofty project.
Yeah.
So most of these people would be involved. So you meet as a large group to discuss the project.
correct.
Okay. And then what happens, and at that meeting, you're basically also giving your feedback and working out any inconsistencies between disciplines, right? Is that correct?
Yes, a little more than that, but yes. I would say it's half that, just making sure. The other half, what I find myself doing in those meetings is trying to understand what does that mean for planning? Because what we're working towards is a planning approval in this phase, right? So a lot of their comments will be like, well, this will be an issue of building, permit time, not so much planning. But I'm trying to confirm as a planner, are there any implications during the planning phase that I need to know about? And that we need to include in this letter, usually as a red flag. Those are the more vague items, right? They'll say, well, it's not technically an issue yet, we don't know. I'm like, but if we have a hunch this is gonna be an issue, let's come up with a way to let them know what we do think or do know. And so we'll kind of navigate that together. Like, how do we give our expertise to say, hey, applicant, we think from our experience this could be an issue. We don't have definitive evidence, we don't have fixture calculations yet, but from what we can tell, or this area of town, this typically is the, issue, and we'll need to study that. Sometimes it has implications of the planning application itself. So for the Macy's project, it's a bigger one, right? So there's everybody involved, and then everybody has to comment of their services. And so we're giving all those but it will have to go through the process, but it's all very, not conjecture, but you're using your expertise to try and give those big ideas out there for the applicant team to go work on. They're going to be the ones that are going to have to study it or get a technical study to analyze it. City staff is trying to inform them, this is what we think you're going to need to unravel a bit. So it's kind of doing that together. What do you think of that? Oh, is that an issue? And also things that are non-issues, just we really would prefer it if this water line was here and not here. Oh, that's not a big deal. Why don't we just say that now, and they'll just draw it different now? We don't need to wait till building. And so it's just kind of anything and everything that could help the project, either now for planning approvals, or just that if we can take care of it now for building permit time, let's start planning on it.
Okay, so I guess my question relates to the fact that we're trying to streamline this process. And I'm thinking, okay, this, we have a lofty project, this group gets together, that's finding a time when the group can meet and all that kind of stuff, and work on this. And then is there for issues that come up from one of these disciplines, for instance, transportation planning or something, is there really you're going away and, are you going away and reviewing the project with the comments made by all these disciplines and then putting it together? What I'm getting at is I'm feeling like the process is cumbersome, and that that some of these disciplines get more than one bite at the apple. And I know that frustrates applicants. Well, I was told this and now I'm being told something else. Or, or you never told me that at the beginning, and that's really going to affect the cost of the project to, for the design, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if you've looked into how, I know there's a group looking into how we can streamline this, but it would seem to me that the planner on the project, who's the one person who takes it, do all these people, all these disciplines have one person that's going to stay on the project throughout the project? I mean, bar retirement or leaving, yeah. So, okay, so.
Yeah, so maybe this helps. All this happens in 30 days.
That was my other question.
Yeah.
Is there a deadline for each of these disciplines to get their feedback?
Yep,
And it's 30 days?
it's less than that.
Okay,
So to give it a rough timeline, so application is submitted week 1. The next week, we're doing a site visit altogether, always.
okay,
The very next week, comments are in. So you've already reviewed your plans, done a site visit, put in your initial comments. We meet and talk and make sure that we're good with each other that same week. And then the final letter is drafted
okay.
and
So
sent. And then we all gather again with the applicant to say, did you have any questions? But all this is always happening in that same 30-day review,
And is
whether it's
that
a
new?
pre-application or an application.
Is that fairly new, the 30-day review?
No.
No, okay, because it,
So that's, you're most familiar probably with it, of the Permit Streamlining Act 30-day review, right?
Right.
Application completeness. We've made our process, our review process fit within that. Everybody's all within that. And that goes, like I said, for the pre-application reviews, as well as the formal application, all within that 30 days to meet that, yeah.
okay, and then what happens if the applicant contacts the planner and says, well, I've made a change, and I'm, instead of 25 units, I want to do 27 units or something? Do they have to go through the whole process again, or?
Usually, yes. So the idea is that's what can, the streamlining is we're reviewing what we have in front of us. We're not going to
Right.
keep taking changes because we've now sent it out to everybody. Everyone's hustled to get their feedback on that same. We wouldn't be commenting on the same set of plans, the same project, right? So what we usually tell applicants is, not a problem, but save that change for next time. We're going to give you some corrections or feedback. Fine, change it. Just hold off and change it next time. Or they'll say, oh, I have this other bit of information. That's fine. Just put it in the package you give us the next time, and we'll just all have it all together. So that way we're not piecemealing here and there, and that keeps us in this churning time frame to be able to meet all our deadlines.
Okay, Okay, I really appreciate your comments on this, because I know this is kind of where we've had a lot of disgruntled applicants, I guess, that are just saying it's taking way too long. So I'm glad that the process has some,
Yeah, we have, it's actually an efficient system, as complex as it is. I think some of the feedback, if I will, is some things that used to be quicker are now subject to 30-day reviews that didn't used to be, let's say. And so we're feeling that. Also, people were used to just going into the planning counter and stamp this now. And because you now have to submit digitally, and then it needs to be, in that digital system, that feels a bit slower, right? Because then it has to get, routed and set to that person. So I think there are elements that feel slower. But on the other hand, before, in the physical world, we're still physical, but when you walked in, you had to wait for the planning counter to be open on a Monday to submit. And we would turn you away if you didn't have the right form anyway. So now people are submitting at midnight on Saturday. Nobody's stopping them. They're submitting 10 applications, and on Monday we have 10 more, even though we weren't open. But we have to process that much more because people had 3 days to submit them, So you're actually able to submit more and much faster, and the volume is coming in without the checks and balances of like, oh, you forgot this form per se. So there's not the person at 2 a.m. telling you, no, you forgot that form, because we don't know that until Monday. And so that feels slower too. They're saying, oh, somebody took a day to even, tell me I'm missing a form. Well, yeah, they weren't working at 2 a.m. on Saturday. You were, So, but you can see how that plays out, that the more access we have digitally, then the volume, how that gets handled feels differently. But yes, but to their point, you can't go in and get something stamped because it needs to be digital.
right.
So it's kind of both. It is
Yeah.
slower and it is faster in other ways.
Well, it sounds like the efficiency has really improved, so I appreciate that.
I hope so. There's still work to be done. I don't mean to say that we're perfect, but no, there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next is Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the fees, I'm curious about, let's say it's a homeowner and it's kind of a rundown home, and it would dramatically improve their quality of life for their family, but they come up on the fees and say it's just not an option, or they have a parcel that could be redeveloped, or it's empty and it could be developed, and it's just, maybe the fees are prohibitive, like that's the last straw for a project. Do you ever connect them, well, one, are there fee waivers? And then do you connect them with, let's say, like Habitat for Humanity or the Housing Authority, so they could work with them to overcome the fees?
That's an interesting concept. No, we don't have that, but I like it. Just because and it improves us as a community, right? If we can improve our infrastructure, whether it's somebody's house or yard. So I can see benefit in that, but no, we don't have a system like that.
Okay, next, Commissioner DeLucio.
2 questions. For efficiencies, does this group ever meet and go over multiple projects at the same time?
No. So everything is distinctly calendared to keep it going. But what we do is, so as I said, like week 1 is site visit, working meetings are always on Wednesday mornings. Site visits are always Thursday mornings. Applicant meetings are always Tuesday afternoons. There are blocks in the week that are pre-carved out, and then projects are put into those time slots, so that, everyone has jobs, believe it or not, beyond LDT, right? They're out there. It's amazing, like fire will come to an applicant meeting or something, be like, man, there'll be a fire going on. They're like, sorry, I was late. There's, all this stuff going on. Like, why are we talking about a project? Go fight a fire. they really do wear multiple hats successfully. And it's not to say that, everybody can attend every meeting, but they are doing a lot on those other days, so we calendar them, and we take that time seriously, right? And so to that end, in terms of customer service, if we have to postpone a meeting, you're postponed to the next week, because we're not just going to pull everyone in on a random Thursday. So we have ways to keep it synchronized.
Can you always meet the 30 days? I mean, is there applications that are so non-complete that you have to ask for additional information?
So we have 30 days to determine whether it's complete or incomplete. So if it doesn't have what it needs, then we say it's incomplete for these reasons. But yes, we also ask for time extension. So like when the city closure, if we got applications in the week before, that ate, week and a half of our time frame. So we would coordinate with the applicant and ask, can we have an additional 10 days or whatever that time is, or if somebody retired and you're taking it over. If there's extenuating circumstances, that happens. But in short, if they don't have anything, you just tell them what they need to be complete.
Okay, thank you. Do you have more presentation? Or
I
is
do,
it-
a little bit more.
Okay, good. Continue.
All right, moving on. So I wanted to hit on this. You obviously are all very well aware of what a public hearing is, but I think it's important to really highlight that the city genuinely is looking to involve our constituents, our people. And this is how it happens in our process specifically, so you can inform others how our hearings happen, when people get noticed, et cetera. So let's start with noticing, because it's usually a hot topic. So standard noticing can happen between 3 and 5 times on a project, if noticing is required. Let's assume it is. So mailed notice postcards will go out to people within 300 feet of a residence. And I want to state here, so the legal requirement is owners. The city does owners and occupants. So if you're a renter, you will receive something addressed to you as an occupant. And then also interested parties with addresses. And I want to hit this for a second. So when people fill out or ask to be added as an interested party, if you want a mailed postcard, you need to provide your mailed physical mailing address. If you don't, you will not get a mailed notice postcard. If you do provide a physical mailing address and you're added as an interested party, you get in the mailer list for that project. Posted agendas, we post them online, we post them physically in our public locations. Emailed agendas, so you can sign up, anyone can sign up to get e-subscription services to any of the hearing bodies for a design review, for planning commission, for water commission, I mean, all kinds of things. You can e-subscribe to get those agendas automatically sent to your inbox. Also, if you're an interested party and you give your email address, then you would get the email of the agenda, the project you're interested in. It's not going to specify it's the agenda for the whole meeting. It's not giving you a snippet, but that's why you would be getting it. So be clear with people if they're interested in following things. Those are the differences. Sometimes people say, well, I signed up, I am an interested party and I didn't get a notice. There might be a reason for that. So if people are really interested in that, let them know how best to serve themselves. The yellow notice placard that you see out, those yard signs, we put those out. And then legal ads are required for land use hearings. In addition to that, the city also does special notices for AUD, or average unit density incentive projects. We require them to do a large rendering posted at the site that has to be, I think it's like 2 by 3 or something, with a rendering or a plan drawing of the proposal. And that's special for those projects. The idea was to draw attention to it and so people could see what was proposed. Also, different than other jurisdictions, we require hand-delivered notices for single-family projects. So if you're doing a single-family project and your project requires noticing, we require you to do a hand-delivered notices to your neighbors saying, I'm doing this project. And the idea is to facilitate conversation and let people know what's going on. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that we really are trying to really involve our community in our process. In addition to that, there's tons of online materials. So now we have all of our hearing schedules for each of our bodies. Oh, I wanted to back up just a sec, just for the public. You guys know this, but there are two kinds of public hearing, or two general public hearing design review hearing bodies. We have three of them: the Single Family Design Review Board, Architectural Board of Review, and Historic Landmarks Commission. All public hearings, all open to the public. Public can attend, can comment, participate. Same with our land use hearing bodies, the staff hearing officers, public hearing, our planning commission, and city council, of course. All of those boards and commissions have online materials, including their schedules, their agendas, their meeting guidelines. We now have architectural drawings online for those hearings. That's new and different as of the last 2-3 years, maybe 3. Which is really nice because it helps you just kind of hone in, and from your home. You don't have to come into the city and make an appointment just to look at some big drawings. You can do it on your lunch break or whatever. So that's really convenient. Staff reports are available for review, minutes of prior meetings, public. And then I wanted to touch on public comment. So there's different ways now that we have public comment than in the past. We can email in, which is nice and convenient. It's no longer just like a mailed letter. You can attend in person, of course. And then also we have our virtual Zoom participation back again. So those have been nice ways to get different people involved that couldn't previously take an afternoon to come in person. Also, we have our hearings broadcasted in different locations. So not only is it on public television on Cox Channel 18, but our hearings are also online streamed. So you can watch live streaming any hearing. They're also, but do know that the live streaming is just viewing only. So I do want to clarify this. If you want to participate in a hearing, meaning you want to make public comment during the hearing, you need to participate via Zoom. And the Zoom will have the hearing going as well. But those are two different links, so I just wanted to point that out. So on the right over here is the City TV live stream channel. And then on the left is the HLC agenda, and the virtual public comment or participation Zoom link is down at the bottom. And that's how you would get into any, you would go to either the Planning Commission's agenda, HLC's agenda. That's where you're going to find your Zoom link. So let people know if they want to participate, make sure they're using that link. Also, all of our public hearings make appealable decisions. Those decisions are generally appealable within 10 calendar days. The applications for appeals are also online. But if you have any questions regarding the appeal process, what's appealable, when is it appealable, when all those things, just contact the planning counter. It's your best point of contact. Now on to the order of public hearings. So can actually be a lot. So all of these are public hearings. So what we just talked about, noticed, publicized, broadcasted. So as you're familiar with, we've had, or as I mentioned, there's pre-application design review hearings. So you want your one-time concept from ABR. You want to know if your project's going to get just totally thumbs down or if they love it. Those are public hearings. If you go to those, that's generally your first hearing. After that is when you would go to Planning Commission for a concept review. So you're most familiar with this with the AUD projects. They'll first go to design review like HLC, and then they'd come to Planning Commission for the concept review. Then they would submit their formal application, and their next hearing would be concept review again, design review. Then they would have their land use approval hearing if one applies. So AUD generally doesn't come back to the Planning Commission, but if you needed a modification approval, you would go to the staff hearing officer for that at that point. The next hearing would be project design approval for design review, and then final design approval. So there's a potential of up to 6 hearings there. If a project isn't going through the pre-app stage, the more typical path would be concept design review, your land use approval if you need one, then project design approval, and final design approval. There are a million variations after this. I mean, it does need this, it doesn't need this, it needs both this and this. So there's a lot of variations, how many hearings, but those are the two most common that your commission would see. In terms of noticing, as I mentioned, you can go up to 5 times of a project being noticed. So at that pre-application design review, that's noticed if noticing is triggered. The pre-application or the concept review at Planning Commission, that's noticed. The concept design review is noticed. The land use approval hearing would be noticed, and project design approval would be noticed. Final design approval would not be. So a lot of noticing is happening, and this is different than, this changed about 2 years ago. We didn't used to notice project design approval. We now do. It's an additional notice that was recently added. The other couple things about noticing here is that noticing is only when it's required by ordinance. It's not just because we feel like it and we don't, or it seems like a big project. It is laid out in the ordinance what the triggers are when noticing is required. As you can imagine, there's a lot of staff resources that goes into noticing. We don't take it lightly, and we, follow the rules in terms of when it applies. So I just want to be clear, not all projects require noticing. Someone can build a single-family house, brand new, demo, rebuild, and it not require a notice to your neighbors, depending on if it hits any of the triggers. So I just want to be clear, not all projects require noticing. The other thing to know is the notice will only go out for the first of those hearings only. So for instance, if you're going to concept design review, we'll send out, and noticing is triggered, it's some AUD project. We send out the notice, but they come back, design review says, like it, but the architecture, no, this massing, not, and then the applicant says, okay, I'll come back. Let me give it another shot. We'll be back. They come back for another, and they say, we're going to go like this. That next hearing is not necessarily noticed, especially if they're continuing to a date certain. Definitely not noticed. And that happens a lot. They're coming back, okay, let me just tweak it, and I'll be back in 4 weeks. Okay, continued 4 weeks. That next hearing is not noticed. So I want to underscore that because people will say, well, I didn't get noticed for that hearing. It's not one for one. It's not every single hearing. It's the first of that type of hearing, I guess. Moving on, and I'll pause there. Any questions about our noticing or public hearings? And then one thing I wanted to pose to you, what do you want the public to know about city public hearings in particular, and what kinds of public comments are most helpful to you? And the reason why I think this is important, since this is a public forum, I've had a lot of projects where people just feel disenfranchised from the beginning. Well, I can comment, but it's not going to matter. And I tried to convey, that's very much the purpose of this whole public process, is to garner the public's opinion in those that live near around a project. So I think as decision makers, and it's important to kind of share about that public process or anything that in particular that would be helpful for staff to help convey, whether it's on our website or any of our materials. I'll leave it there.
Okay, we have Commissioner Boss who would like to start the questions off on this section.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I just want to clarify, so when the staff hearing officer continues an item to another hearing to come back, that second is not noticed. Okay, so they would need to attend to the first or have heard from their neighbors that it would be continued.
Yeah, in general, the rule with noticing, or the idea, is you're sent a notice and then it's on you or your responsibility to follow a project. So what the result of that hearing would be your responsibility to find out.
Great, thank you. And then just looking at your questions, questions I get or thoughts I have about a lot of meetings are that they're during the workday for a lot of people or the school day for a lot of people, so it's hard to attend, which I understand you're all working as well and have families. But that is a challenge. So I don't know that 7 a.m. meetings or noon or 7 p.m. meetings are going to work well, but that is a challenge for a lot of people. And fortunately, they're able to send in public comment in advance, but if they just hear the day before, they're not sure it got through in time. I think that's a challenge that I hear from folks. And then also when people can or should say things. So is it too late in the process? Is it too early in the process? And really what's within their purview, if it's something in their neighborhood or, single-family home next to them. They're often not sure what to say except no or I don't like it. So really what's in the public's purview as well. So just like we
Yeah.
have our purview, what's the public's purview? I think that would be a helpful resource.
I like that.
And then something that might be helpful for people to know is really the game between the city policies and state policies and what the city can do to be more progressive in certain policies. I think that's helpful for the public to know because a lot has happened, especially just in the last couple of years around housing in particular at the state level and city. And it seems like we're always trying to catch up or play the game between what supersedes what. And I think we're all grappling with that. And so the public certainly is as well.
It's good to know. Any other thoughts?
No, I was just asking, do you have a response to that last?
Oh, in terms of, so what my thought was is that's why I like the website resources and I think we should continue to develop like the guidance documents or this is our take on this, in terms of applying it in the city specifically, because there'll be a state guidance, right, of thou shalt do X, Y, and Z. But what people really want to know, what does that mean here if we are a charter city? Or if we do have design review, does that mean we don't have design review now? So I think to your point, my vision would be that we continue to kind of develop in those guidance web pages or document either way. The benefit of it also being a web page is you can, Google or search, City of Santa Barbara, new housing requirement, or no affordability or whatever. And so that's the other benefit of having pages that people can find. Although we want to make sure the website's easy to navigate to, it's also nice that if you were able to search for it. So my thought would be to continue to work on kind of those things as things come down the pike. And I will touch on when we go live on the website, how we've framed our website for kind of that when things are first in like policy, in process of being adopted, right? So let's say an accessory dwelling unit rules are changing and we're amending our ordinance and we're having hearings about that, how we're changing it, come talk. And then there's a stage where now we made that ordinance, now it are the rules, and now everybody's following those. And we have different places for when things are in flux and it's in process versus this is now our code. But having the influx pages, I think, are helpful.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to take a stab at these questions that you've asked, what questions do you often get about the city's public hearings? I think the main question is, how do I speak, or how do I get my thoughts across, and also to advise the public. We get a lot of speakers that say, oh, this is my first time up here and I'm really nervous. So I think letting people know that there are different ways to communicate at a public hearing is really important, and I think maybe we should advertise that more. I'm looking at this, which describes it all, but it's rather daunting because it's all small print and it's, it does go over all the different ways to comment. But maybe something like, did you know you can comment via email, Zoom, or come down to City Hall and speak is important. And I think it's also important for the public to know that that we take public comment very seriously, and that we really appreciate public comment. I think that's important. And what kinds of public comments are most helpful to you? My only comment there is that we do have a time limit oftentimes we will get some substantial and really good public comment the morning of a hearing. And oftentimes, it's too late to be able to sit down and really, break it down if it's substantive. So I think it's important to show the deadlines on written public comment. So people know, try to get your comments in early, but we encourage you to give us your thoughts because they are important to us. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments questions on this? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The printed document, that's the notices, the agenda, the official one that we print out here, I get the sense that we're at this crossroads between a printed document and something online. Clearly we are. And online, we can do so much more, throw in pictures and graphs and stuff that this very kind of hidebound document doesn't let us do. One of the things that I've always thought is that the beginning set of paragraphs, which you just referenced earlier, where you tell written public comments can be done this way, et cetera, that opening page on the agenda, et cetera. I was involved in printing and writing. I've been involved in printing and writing my entire life. And a study was done in 1920 that said the human eye cannot begin to digest a line of print if it's more than 13 words. 13 words, when your eye is tracking across that line, excessive begin to lose the place and you drop down 2 lines or 3 and you get lost and you kind of give up. We have 20. Now, I know that's probably a paper-saving thing that, again, goes back to what I opened my comments with, the difference between the old world of printing and the modern world of what we can do on the screen. But I would suggest that some of those things are more reader-friendly. If we look at, maybe we have a different thing online than what comes out, printed one. It might be something that would be beneficial to us. I want to also compliment you, as was said a moment ago, about the presentation that you're giving us. I'm just dazzled by all of this sort of stuff. But I guess I want to finish my wife works as the communications officer for the Santa Barbara County Education up on the hill there. And she is developing different formats for different ways to distribute information. And I think it would be cool if we could look into that so that this very agenda item, if you access it on the web, will be laid out much differently, easier to read, et cetera, et cetera. Now, maybe that just takes a lot of work to do and we can't go that far. Anyway, that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnwell. Any other comments, questions? Okay, looks like Commissioner Boss has one more.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Barnwell's comments just made me realize, I've seen on social media that interested parties, like community associations, will often give a how to participate in planning commission or city council, and that's been really helpful. I just think like, oh, they're reaching people who can't decipher these documents, and they'll give the basics of like, here's the meeting, here's why you should attend or might be interested, here's the Zoom link, like they'll do the little animated arrow to the Zoom link on the agenda and kind of zoom in for you. So, and I think I've seen the city, a few different departments do some really engaging social media posts as well, but maybe that's a good way to engage more folks.
Okay, any other, okay. More presentation or?
A little bit more.
Okay.
And then we're almost done. Thank you for the comments, though. That's kind of what I wanted to get at, is what you guys are noticing, hearing. It's good feedback as we work on improvements. A little bit more, too. So Planning Commission's role, you're fairly familiar. As a commission, you're a discretionary review body. Sometimes your role is to provide conceptual review and comments. Sometimes it's to make a land use decision. Other times an environmental determination, or it's to provide recommendations to the city council. And other times it's to provide recommendations to design review when it's a project in their purview, or take action on appeals. Any way you slice and dice it, your role is a lot, and there's 2 pages worth of all the types of permit applications or land use decisions that you have purview over. For the public, the Planning Commission's role, to be clear, is to, 1, review the materials of any application. The Planning Commission does a site visit to the given project site. And then the rule is to consider staff's recommendation, any design review recommendations or other recommendations, which we generally provide to you in your staff report. And then consider public input and determine if the findings can be supported and then take that action. And I wanted to touch on that kind of determine if the findings can be supported for you to take your action, because it allows you the ability as a discretionary body that you can approve a project as staff is presenting it in terms of, our recommended findings and conditions of approval, or you can conditionally approve it, meaning tweaking something or, adding your layer of review or requirement to it, or deny it if you see appropriate. Which brings us into conditions of approval. To kind of demystify why conditions of approval are added, because they're not always so simpler projects that go just to design review, for instance, may have no conditions of approval. Even staff hearing officer, many projects don't require a condition. What it is they're asking for, they get. There's not really additional tweaking that needs to be made to be able to make those findings. The more complex a decision, there's a lot more involved. So generally, your commission is making, including conditions to make sure that the project is consistent with code or regulations, whether it's, and that's not just planning, but it could be, a public works code requirement that sidewalks need to be of some city standard, and so we pull that into the conditions as a template standard. Or consistent with the general plan. So in general, the project is developed to be consistent, but there might be something that we need to ensure is consistent and remains that way, because that was, your approval was contingent upon that, so we include those conditions. Or to ensure environmental impacts are addressed. So if mitigation measures are required, the conditions of your approval would be that those mitigations do need to happen. They need to be implemented as analyzed in our environmental review. So those are kind of the general conditions. But also we use conditions in other little more creative ways, not just the black and white of what the code says or policy, but sometimes, like I said, it's to make sure city standards are applied. So transportation, might say you need to use this kind of bike rack or this kind of city standard. Sometimes it's to clarify next steps. You need to do this, then this, or this approval is contingent upon. Or bring attention to regulations that apply. This is kind of a weird one for planning, because sometimes we feel like, is it necessary to restate the code? I mean, should we just put the whole Muni code in the conditions of approval? Why are we restating something? So we try to peel it back to really when it needs to be drawn attention to. So a common one of this is like the air quality requirements. Those are required. You have to adhere to them. But does everyone know about dust control measures that are required or reporting to ABCD? No. So we generally put them in as a standard condition so that contractors are aware of the requirements. It's not that they now have more power. They would be legally required regardless, but sometimes that extra attention just helps the construction process. And then lastly, sometimes just to identify items that require future compliance. So even though the project scope was really clear that they will emphatically operate this way, we want a condition that says you will operate that way because it matters to our ability to really move forward and feel comfortable making these findings. So there's a little more nuance to just straight code, but then there's also a number of them that are, kind of template conditions. So when you guys were onboarded as planning commissioners, you would have received staff's internal template of our conditions of approval. It's the fun multicolored document on the right. It's not so fun always to play with. But the idea is that you have standard text, and then there's guidance as to when we're applying a particular condition, usually related to if there's a requirement that points to it or not for that type of construction, that type of project, that type of area in the city. So we have guidance for our general template, and that's generally what staff prepares. We go through that and we say, here's a standard, and we pull out the things that apply to that specific project. Planning staff's involved in that. The LDT staff is involved to make sure their items are in there as well. That's all planning staff does. Just to hit on this, in that template, the way the city organizes our conditions of approval, a little bit different than other jurisdictions I've worked for. We kind of order them in terms of implementation, which I kind of like. Other places kind of have them like by subject, all the tree conditions, all the design review conditions. Here we order them, this is what you need to do first. You need to get your entitlements. Order of development is A. And then B is this approval is contingent upon. So if you need to do annexation or a rezone or something, map recordation. Then next is recorded conditions agreement. So those are things that we feel are imperative to be recorded against the property. So anything in this section is saying, if we have this condition in, this owner needs to record a document against the property that has these items in it. And the intent of that is that any new owner then, it lives with the property. So a new owner will get the title report and know what conditions apply to their property. So the idea is there's supposed to be paramount importance that this needs to be conveyed to anyone taking on this property. Then design review follows that. And design review is usually the timing of design review. So prior to design review, what else do you need to do? So generally, plans going to Planning Commission are pretty well baked. There's not a lot left to flesh out except maybe, landscape, lighting, some, irrigation. You guys see pretty well baked plans, but it doesn't mean they're fully detailed. There might be items that either need to be corrected or fully identified, so that we would put those out, prior to design review, do these things. Requirements prior to issuance, same thing. Construction implementation requirements, this is during construction, you need to do a sound barrier, a noise barrier. During construction, you need to do, air quality measures, sound protections. Prior to certificate of occupancy are those final things we need. That's generally our last hook, is before building and safety gives occupancy to a building, which means all inspections are completed. They now can move in. You're done with the city. Your building permit's closed out. So anything that needs to happen before we're done with the process needs to be done prior to certificate of occupancy. And then last is general conditions. So that's kind of the framework. So as you're thinking, if there are things that you're thinking, this needs to be included in what we're doing here, because I don't think it's, this approval is appropriate without really having this other item, you'll want to kind of figure out where in that framework that requirement would fall. So again, to kind of circle back, is staff just takes the general ones that would apply to that type of construction, that type of project, using our template. We're not generally doing many creative conditions unless the project called for it, because what is most common, the applicant will offer something. I'm going to do this. I'm offering to go above and beyond. I will just replace the sewer main for the whole street. And great. And you approve it because you say, that's needed for this project. You're agreeing to do it. You said it in your project scope, but we want to add that condition, really nail that in. So staff will include that because it was a very clear offer and we want to really capture it. We'll do those things. But beyond that, that's where you guys come in terms of looking at your findings. Do you have everything in there that you need to feel comfortable making those findings with everything laid out as it is? Is there something that you feel, looks like a duck, talks like a duck, walks like a duck, and you're just not convinced that is there a conversation that needs to happen about what is the hurdle with the finding that you feel is not, a project is not making it? or additional clarity or specificity, right? We have template conditions, might be a little bit vague. Are we talking about this street improvement or that street? Or are we talking about this tree or that tree? So always welcome Planning Commission's comments or edits or clarifications on conditions. I think it improves the process. I myself worked in permit compliance for years, construction monitoring, and looking at conditions and going like, could we have been a little clearer as to the purpose of this condition? What am I looking for? What tree? Where are we going? When do you want me to check that? So certainly if you see the need to add specificity, that is fair. That's within your purview. And then last, I already kind of touched on any corrections or details that need to be completed or prior to design approval or permit issuance that you can make your findings just fine for the approval of a said use, but you do want the plans to ultimately show, water conserving landscaping in a certain area or something that is a little more detailed than required for you at this point in time, but you do want that follow through. So that just kind of wanted to frame where we take things and then we hand it kind of to you guys and know where we leave off. It's not that we're using our brains. We try to use, plug in what we think you would want to see. But, your role is to kind of add that discretion and really make sure if something special is needed, you're comfortable doing so. So that's where I'll leave that. And then we are almost done, I promise, just the website stuff. So question is just, do you have any questions about any of the elements that go into the materials you review, whether the conditions, what staff does or doesn't do in any of your package?
Any questions, any commissioners?
I have one.
Mr. Barnwell?
Is this packet of information that you've given us this afternoon, is this available online for the average citizen who'd want to know, so what the heck's going on? What does the Planning Commission do? How do they do? What is it all? Is this all available?
We can post it as, I'm looking at Mariah, I think we could post it perhaps as like a staff report. Would that be-
Yeah, we could post it I could save it as a PDF and create a staff report for it and then post it online.
That would be great. I don't know, maybe you pull some things out and, accent other ones so that the average person can understand it. But I don't know how everyone else feels about this. I go to the code 10 times a week because of my appraisal job. And, the rule of thumb is you want any document to be understandable at a 7th grade level. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we're there. And I wonder, as we're talking about the content here, which I think is brilliant, at some point in the next 12 months or somewhere along the line, can we talk about the presentation of that content? Mm-hmm. I think many of the citizens' complaints and observations that are negative, they might just come from, they can't tell. They don't know. Mm-hmm. They go and look it up and they they get frustrated just with the presentation of the information. So I would think that'd be another thing. I want to thank you again for this information, but how we present it, I think, is another big component of what you've given us today. But thank you very much for what you have given us.
Okay, any other commissioners have any questions?
Can I make a comment about this? I think this is the most important section of everything you presented to us today. And actually, I think it's beneficial to the public, but it's even more beneficial to us as planning commissioners, which I advocated last year that this is something that we needed. That the most important thing is, can we make the findings? And I know last year we struggled with things that came before us, and I felt like we weren't always focused on, can we make the findings? And so I think, yes, make it user-friendly, but I think it's more a tool for us as planning commissioners to stay focused.
Commissioner Wardrow.
Thank you, Chair Balke. Okay, I have a question in terms of minimum conditions necessary to ensure consistency with code, general plan, and environmental requirements. So when you're looking at environmental requirements, right, that's kind of like a yes, no, you do meet you meet the requirement or you don't. If we're looking at a general plan component, and specifically let's talk about housing, and it's clear that the general plan is prioritizing the importance of affordable housing, but the project doesn't really do that in the way that would, in my opinion, represent prioritizing affordable housing. I think that, you know, I've personally have struggled with this, given that like this is such a big priority to me and to the city and to, you know, the community. Yet, if the code says the zoning is, this is allowed in the zoning that it is, but the goals of the general plan don't support the code, then when we're making the findings, are we still empowered to say, I cannot make these findings because of the fact that this is not consistent with the general plan's stated goals, even though it is compliant in the code in terms of maybe the zoning and the use that's proposed? This is an issue that I feel like I've struggled with, and I don't know if this is the right form to address it, but given that you're discussing it, I thought I would raise it.
I'll allow Tava to chime in, and then I can add if there's something I can.
So, Chair Bauke, Vice Chair Wardlow, obviously, consistency with the general plan is what we're looking for in projects, but keeping in mind that the general plan has many, many policies. And occasionally, a project, for example, if it's a hotel, it may not necessarily be using the policies that we would find in a housing element. It's a land use, it's from our land use plan element, which may have differing policies. So when you're looking for a project's compatibility with the general plan, you're looking across the plan elements and looking at each of them and finding which one balances with the project, which one's appropriate for the project, and then balancing those. Our zoning code should be consistent with our general plan, and it generally is. So in some zones, you can have a commercial use and you can have a housing use. That means you can have both, and it's still going to be compliant with the general plan. So it's probably not the most satisfactory answer that you're looking for, but it's all I can give you, and Ms. Arciniega can chime in if she wants to.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly that, but no, but really I was gonna say it's a balancing of policies. Even within the same element, you might have not conflicting policies, well, a little bit, and it's a balancing between them. But I do think, to the point of the zoning being consistent with the general plan, that's intentional. So the general plan is not just looking at one use in our city. It's a plan for all uses. Where do they go? Where are they most suited for, least suited for? And then trying to guide development in that direction for those areas. And then the zoning is what implements, saying, okay, so in these areas, we've said this is an allowed use and this is not. So it's that implementing of what any of those are. So generally, if the zone allows for that, it would be consistent with the general plan.
Right. So even in the example provided of the land use element, right, the land use element prioritizes, you know, aspects of affordable housing. And yet the land use element also, you know, it is supporting the code of the zoning, right? I think that part of the role of this commission is to use the discretion to ensure that we're reaching the higher level goals of the overall general plan, right? And so to me, when we see the housing element and the land use element also talk about the prioritization of affordable housing, it feels to me that we can make the findings that it's not consistent with the general plan's goals if we're looking at a project that could be eligible to address that larger goal of housing, but yet the project that's being proposed does not address those things. I understand this is a very difficult topic, so I can probably talk about this offline.
Well,
But
thank you.
it is a good example of balancing and in the interplay of making that finding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Wardlow, because from my experience, it's a giant balancing act, and general plans and zoning ordinances they're not line for line consistency. There are vagaries and balancing between different subject matters that always need to be done, and that tends to be what the commissions end up having to reconcile, is those inconsistencies and priorities, and those ebb and flow too. So I just want to put that out there.
Can I jump in? What rules then the general plan of the zoning ordinance? Isn't the general plan the one that would take precedence over the zoning ordinance? Because they have to be consistent, and it filters down from the general plan.
It depends, so I will point this out, the actions that your commission takes, I'm pretty sure always include a consistency with general plan, but know that not all actions do. So there are approvals that don't require consistency with the general plan. You have to look at the findings required for that specific entitlement. So, and follow those. And the wording can even be slightly different. So it's really specific to the findings needed for that specific request or entitlement are in that's your barometer for that project. And there are instances of inconsistency. I know of a parcel that is zoned residential, land use designation, Parks and Rec. Residential's not allowed for air quality reasons. Park, nobody wants to make it a park. I mean, it's like, so then what's the best and highest use? And it's like, someone will have to make sense of that at some time. So there are inconsistencies. And then it's kind of like what proposal comes forward and what can be supported one way or, would it be residential or park kind of thing. So it's not always as clear as we'd love.
Commissioner Wardlow, do you have?
One other question. So I appreciate your distinction around the findings, right? Because we've seen that over and over again. Some projects want us to make different findings than other projects, and that's where it gets more gray on, how what we're going to interpret and what's going to kind of give more priority when it comes to the general plan. Is it the team that that you just kind of went over of all the individuals from the various staff departments that come together? Who decides what are the specific findings that must be made, or how is that determined? Because I have seen the variety, and where some projects I'm like, okay, well, there's nothing to do here. Whereas sometimes when it's very specific on what that finding needs to be, then there's kind of more discussion leeway on that interpretation. So who
Findings
decides?
come from the code. from
Okay,
the
so it's just strictly from the code?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it. But
They just vary depending on the entitlement. Like a conditional use permit would have different findings because the ask is different. So you're asking to use this property in a special way than any, it might be residential zone, but you're asking to do a church, which is allowed with the CUP. But the findings would be geared towards, okay, you can do a church, but can we say that you've addressed, parking and service, whatever a church would need appropriately for this site versus some other type of entitlement.
so it's still tailored to the project?
It's tailored to whatever that entitlement is for.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Arganega, for bringing this to us. I mean, this is, you did a very good job. And I think I'll speak for the commission that, we definitely appreciate you bringing this to us because honestly, I learned some things about how Santa Barbara does things and some of the interactive public interface, post-COVID is different than I experienced, a year or two when I was looking around and trying to do things. So on the website, so it's. I think this was very helpful and definitely helpful for any member of the public that chooses to watch our planning commission meetings if they so be. So with that, I'm going to close this particular item and move us. What?
Yeah, one more thing.
Oh, yeah, one more. I thought we were done.
That is it. Well, I was going to show you a couple key takeaways for our website and tools. And I think this is will be helpful for you just as residents, and then also for when you talk to neighbors and you're trying to help people out. I want to point out a few things on our website that are really good tools and go-to items. So I'm just going to tootle around. Let me show off our website. So here's our homepage. City of Santa Barbara welcomes you. There are ways to navigate through here, but what I want to draw your attention to is one of my favorite pages, construction and land development. If you're not familiar, this is our home base for all kind of the things we touched on before, asking a counter question, finding out about how to apply for a permit, so getting into our portal, the link to the portal is there, all kinds of info on how to navigate that. Fee information right now only has planning and building, but it is helpful to know our fee schedule and kind of look into where, and then how to pay. We have different, now you can pay online, you can do cash or credit card, where years past we couldn't. Forms and applications for, all the various departments. The best one, of course, is planning. And here's all our forms. The video is about how we changed our forms in 2020. We, new look and feel, kind of made things simpler, more user-friendly. The top is a heavy hit list of that I do recommend. So the design review checklist is a good take-home message for everybody. Why? Because this is what triggers design review. So it's not a mystery. Why is this going to have design review versus something not? So what things trigger HLC versus the Architectural Board of Review, and then on the back page is single family. And this is what I always tell homeowners, read this, know this. It's not intuitive that a wall or fence 3.5 feet in height is going to be a triggering design review approval, but it does. And it doesn't necessarily mean the full board, but it might mean a staff approval. So not all of our triggers are intuitive. They are being worked on to be reduced and kind of all those things, good things, improvements happening. But always point people or yourself, check it out. The other thing in terms of design review to know, you can go to the design guidelines, and this is why. So we have I love this slideshow, by the way. I really love that we have it. We have so many design guidelines, like I've never seen so many. So we organize them by boards and commissions, certain site and building features like fence, wall, and hedge guidelines or Santa Barbara colors, all the things you need to know. Multifamily and commercial, kind of things, and specific areas in town. Chapala Street has its own design guidelines, Upper State Street, et cetera. But here's the thing to tell people in order to remember. The design review guidelines for each board and commission have a section for administrative design guidelines. What that means, this is black and white. These are the things that staff can approve. If you do a fence of natural wood that is, less than this height, then we can approve it as staff. If you choose metal or something real fun and funky, that's great, but we just can't approve it ourselves. So you will have to go to the full board or consent. The reason why I highlight that is because we're not trying to make work for ourselves. We have plenty. And if someone new going to Home Depot, this material versus that got me no review, a quick review stamp off versus a prolonged process, I think people would be inclined to try to fit within those parameters. So let's get the word out. This is what you need to do if you want to get administrative, if design review applies. It has to be something that triggers it. But if you get in the trigger bucket, aim for something that can be administratively approved, right, then not. So that's my rant about design review triggers. All the boards have them. Keep them. So that's planning stuff. There's also planning application guide. This is just a big picture of the planning process, kind of a lot of what we talked about today, but in written form, which nobody's really spending their weekends reading. But if you needed a reference document or to find that, and you know it might be somewhere, it's probably in here. Like if you're looking for, the review processes, is design review required, or things appealable, that kind of stuff. There's good info in there, so just know that it exists and that you can go back to it. There's all kinds of things in here in terms of, so generally the way it works, we talked about the planning application. That's your application. There's supplemental applications if you have kind of nuanced things, so like coastal, here's all our supplemental are here. These are all the things that you would add, kind of addendums, if you will, to that application. There's calculators in here in terms of density, floor area, good stuff. I know we're not spending our weekends doing it, but if you need them, they are there. The other thing I wanted to touch on, archive plans and records. So back again at construction land development, a lot of people want to know how you find out about your property and your, anything and everything. This is our old system. Look, we're not doing that anymore. But, so there's two things. You can search the online database or schedule an appointment, and people are like, well, obviously, I'm going to just search right now. That's fine. Just know that it doesn't include plans. So the reason, where's the little, here we go. It's planning files, so like the staff reports and memos and minutes that are associated with a permit approval, those are available online, or the street files. But the plans themselves are by appointment only. And not generally expected, that appointment is usually 2 to 3 weeks out. So if you're in escrow looking at a property or you're trying to research it, schedule the appointment right away, get that going. If you need copies of plans, that's the other thing people ask. There's all the info here about how you get copies. Basically, you have to get rights to copy it, right? So that's a coordination between records and archives and the engineer of record or whoever it was. So that's just the things that are, you wouldn't expect. So I like to give people a heads up. And that's a lot of people doing research. It's for a reason. They want to get the records. So let them know. Spread the word. It can take some time. We're not trying to be mean. That's just what it is. The other thing is hearing documents, whether yourself or your friends that want to see your videos. I always forget, boards and commissions. There's so many boards and commissions, I honestly will do. I bookmark them. But you can also do, oh geez. Planning commission. So here's your guys' webpage. You can bookmark it. There are agendas and documents. The other thing to know that I just found out, I think somebody asked, these accordions disappear if there isn't that item. So this week we didn't have a staff report, so there isn't an accordion for staff reports. If there isn't a public notice or a public comment, then that accordion will disappear. Know that that happens. It's not, the website's not broken, it's just it needs to have that. So, but in general, if you have a regular meeting, minutes, stuff, all the things, you'll have an accordion for each of those. This page stays current with just the current items. If you need archive material, there's a search feature. The search feature is not the most intuitive always. There's two kinds, search by type, and then by item. I generally give a range, even if, I don't know, just for safe searching. You can pick the board and commission, I usually do. You can pick the type of document or not. So let's say let's pick something. And we want to do planning commission. The one thing I want to point out for you guys and everyone else is minutes don't have the title of the item. So you know how you normally would look for, I don't know, for an address, 7205 San Rafael. Like 320 West Carrillo Street, right, comes up. If you typed in 320 West Carrillo Street in that search bar, then that would come up. But this agenda wouldn't, because it doesn't have that in the title, the address in the title. So you would have to be looking for the date, which is a little annoying and clunky, to be honest, right? But that's how you do it. It's a little bit different for council agenda items. So, right, they have a different system. City Hall. No, I did that wrong. I always lose them.
Mayor and city council.
Where's that?
Deb, just go down.
Oh, here. That's why. It is an own tab in it. Yeah. I actually like going, city council meetings. And their stuff is archived videos and rezos in a different system. This is what's referred to as the on-base system. The planning commission and other boards and commissions will be going to this system in the near future in terms of archiving. We're not there now, or they're in transition, is my understanding. But no, it's a little bit of a different search system.
Well, while you're on that, I have a question. I
Sure.
noticed that the Planning Commission public comments of record are easily available. At the council level, I don't know how you even can get written public comments, because they don't even show up on their agenda, they don't show up as an attachments, other than asking the city clerk point blank, can I have, this organization's comments? Why is that the case? Why do they not have public comments on items available to the public? It just makes no sense to me.
I don't know. I don't know, because
Chair
they are a
Bauke?
different system, yeah.
Chair Bauke, it's,
Yes.
the Brown Act doesn't require that they be online, and at this time, the clerk doesn't have the capacity to post them. However, it's something that we're working on.
Okay, because it seems inconsistent. Ours are and theirs are not, and you think the public would like probably to see them. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry for the interruption.
No, I think you guys are going to be surprised. I think I'm done. But if you have any questions in terms of the website or tools or things you've tried to find, I can try and answer those. Otherwise, I'll leave you be.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Barnwell.
Do we have a webmaster? Do we have someone within the city who's in charge of this whole thing?
Not a single person. So we just recently did this overhaul, right, of kind of beautification and new, it was more than just beautification. It's a whole new website framework. And there's a sustainment team website that goes across various departments. The idea is to keep consistency on the website, that we're treating things the same, that things are actually maintained and people are trained and pages are being updated. So there's a whole system in place and team in terms of web maintenance. Also, this was one of those products that we didn't get out of the box. We got a customized product with the very intention that now we own that product and we can customize it to suit our needs for much longer in the future and kind of have more control over what we need.
Mr. Chair, I'm going just a little inch deeper on this. Do we have a communications officer for the city of Santa Barbara that's responsible for putting out to the wide world the various things we do?
Yes. We have Brian Latchford. Brian Latchford. Do you know his title, Teva? So yes, we have multiple, yes, we do have Brian Latchford, who is kind of like our public PIO. And you'll see there's news, so he does press releases and other various kind of messaging and consistency and all that kind of stuff. But there are also individual departments doing that. So you'll see there's like kind of what's happening now or various news tickers. Some of them are citywide controlled, right? It's like a citywide news feed. And then each department has its own ability to do a news ticker. So we do have, like on our construction, land development, our own little news ticker related to just planning items down at the bottom. So our AUD updates and then, you know, all our news from the past, whatever. But this is just planning related because presumably that you care about those things versus you could subscribe to those to get updates or emails. But there's various levels of that, right? So there's multiple.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Thank you, Commissioner Barnwell. Any more questions?
Chair
Okay.
Balky, can we open and close public comment? Doesn't look like there's anybody in here, but we
Okay,
should open and close it.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this?
Thank you, Chair Balky. At this time, I don't have any speaker slips, and there are no virtual participants, but I did misspeak earlier that we did receive a public comment from Stephen A. Johnson, but it wasn't for general public comment, it was for this item. So I just wanted to make that clarification, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair
Yes.
Balky.
Solely noted, okay. Thank you. So moving on to administrative agenda, we have the committee and liaison reports. Commissioner Boss, do you have a staff hearing officer report?
Natton?
No, okay. Other members, do you have any reports? No, okay, so I'm the only one that does, okay. The Objective Design Standards Working Group will be meeting on Friday, February 9th, and at that time, we'll be discussing the schedule for adoption of the ODDS document, the public outreach results we had from the architectural survey map discussions, and we will be going through the working group's comments on the last draft and talking about the review process for the ODS to come to all the different design review bodies and to this commission. So just want to put that out there. So that's the end of that, my comments on that, and I'm not seeing any other administrative reports. I do want to bring forward for discussion, and I will need, according to Tava, to do such. I would like to discuss the process of forming some subcommittees for the Planning Commission. To do so, we need to have it on the agenda, so I'm asking concurrence of the commission to bring that forward and put that on the agenda, along with concurrence to have a discussion about potential workshop and other training items that might be helpful to establish. Basically, my goal here is to improve the communication and also the information to the public and to ourselves that's out there. There's a lot of vacuum out there that we need to fill. And with that, I'd like a motion from somebody to bring these to the.
So moved.
Okay.
And that movement is that we calendar in the future a discussion for the Planning Commission on the possibility and the need for subcommittees and for workshops. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Could I have a second?
I'll
Second.
second that.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, so with that, could we just do this by unanimous consent, or do we need to go through
You can do all in favor, say aye.
all in
Aye.
favor, say aye?
Aye.
Okay, we're.
Aye.
Aye,
good.
aye, aye.
Okay, speed up the process. So with that, at 3:12, I
Miss-
will, yes.
I have my light on.
Oh, you have,
It occurred to me that that Chair Bonderson had been, who's no longer on the commission, was the Planning Commission representative to the State Street Advisory Committee. I don't know if it's still meeting or not, but I don't remember that anyone got,
I took up that new role.
oh, you took it up?
Yes.
Okay,
And
okay.
that, there's a couple of reasons for that, because there's a lot of next steps on that process, and what we were finding, even last year, we were trying to establish a couple of meetings between the HLC and the Planning Commission and the State Street staff, and there was so many cooks in the kitchen that it was very hard to, so picking me, one less cook in the kitchen as far as getting even those meetings to happen, so.
Okay.
So I have stepped forward when we did their appointments.
Okay.
To do that.
Chair,
Thank you.
the HLC is going to be meeting on the 31st to talk about the master plan and their role in the State Street Master Plan. So if I can report on it at the next meeting, or if you want to watch it, it should be pretty interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's not a necessarily committee report, but last night there was a public meeting on what's referred to as the neighborhood, which is the land in and around the Macy's department store in La Cumbre Plaza. And every chance we get, I guess we should tell the general public about these meetings. It wasn't an official city meeting, but there were I would say, a couple hundred people there. From my own perspective, it was nice to see the early options that they were throwing out to the public. Things like 4 or 5 renderings on what does your ideal open space look like, and what does your ideal public pathway look like. And I thought it was very informative. So, and also they served food, and that was nice.
I know.
Everyone was walking away with armloads of food.
Okay. No, I had the pleasure of walking through that presentation yesterday. I'm not sure any other commissioners did, but, it's a good start to get the community dialogue going on that very, very important project, so.
I think there are more than 200 people there. Yeah.
There's a line out the door and down the block. Okay, let's
Yes.
just put it that way. Okay, so, anyway, with that, I'm going to adjourn today's meeting at 3:14. This concludes the January 18th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, February 8th or 1st? Well, are we formally canceling the first one?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. The next one will be February 8th.
Okay, for February 8th, so, thank you.